Welcome to the MLB Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden, taking a look at tonight's slate on FanDuel and DraftKings. Good size slate here. A lot of good pitching options, cores, a lot of cold weather, which definitely kind of deflates some offenses here. We've kind of seen it at the start of the year where we expected some stacks to kind of go off, but I think weather's kind of hindering some stuff right now.
Yeah, I think we've said it a couple times already. I think this is probably the slowest start to a season we've seen in a while, just because the weather has really ruined things for a lot of slates. We've had games postponed because of cold weather. We could have that happen tonight. So I'm tired of the cold weather. You can see I'm bundled up still. It's still cold here. Freaking snowed on Saturday at like 9 a.m. and then was like 58 degrees at like 5 p.m. It's This weather sucks.
Yeah, we had like a pretty vicious thunderstorm roll through because it's like upper 70s, 80s, so it's starting to get some rain here. If you can't see, Brent is giving me the death stare right now. I guess let's move on here. Toronto, Baltimore, Jay Happ taking on Dylan Bundy. Bundy, I'm curious Bundy's ownership tonight. I think he's going to be fairly popular here because of his price tag, but in a really good spot. He's obviously coming off two excellent starts. Does rely on that slider, which is perfect for a matchup against Toronto, who have been awful against sliders dating back to last year. So definitely going to like some Bundy here tonight.
I think it dates back to like the last decade that the Blue Jays have struggled against sliders, and he made it into my pitching article today. He's one of the guys that I'm actually going to be building around if I'm not going to pay up for the top dollar pitchers. At this point, if for the game for what he's doing, he's just still way too cheap. He's striking out a ton of batters. I mean, 29.4% strikeout rate dating back to last season. He's doing a lot of work outside of the zone, which is really, really good to see. Toronto is chasing pitches outside of the zone at like a 30% rate. So if he's able to get those breaking pitches working, these Blue Jays bats are going to be swinging and missing a lot. So I really do like him. He's done a decent job of limiting hard contact. He hasn't really struggled with walks or anything like that. So as long as the ball's staying in the park, and if it's cold in Baltimore, it definitely could help keep the ball in the park. I think he's going to be an excellent option today.
Yeah, I do too. And like, I really don't have a ton of interest in Toronto bats, even as like one-offs here. I think because of the amount of Bundy I'm going to be using, I'm probably just fading Toronto.
Yeah, none of them really stood out to me as guys that I really wanted to look at. I mean, if you wanted to roll out like a one-off of like a Donaldson or Smoke, you could. I imagine Granderson's still dirt cheap across the industry. You could roll him out as maybe a one-off or something like that.
Yep. Other side of things, you and I were talking a little bit before the show. Like, we expect Jay Happ to potentially have a decent start here. He just doesn't really have the upside. It's hard for me to click in Jay Happ over some of these other guys, but I just wouldn't be surprised to have a solid start. But I don't mind a couple of Baltimore one-offs. I don't see them as really a stack just because I don't think they put it all together tonight. But like a Jonathan Scope or Machado are definitely interesting one-offs here tonight for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily mind happen in tournaments if you're wanting to fade some of the guys that are in the same price range. Obviously, against a Baltimore team that does strike out a lot against left-handed pitching, you can still roll him. But I do have more interest in some of the guys you mentioned, the Jonathan Scopes, the Machados. I think Machado makes an excellent one-off in the spots, especially on DraftKings, like at 4,500, he has that multi-position eligibility, and you're going to get him at much lower ownership than guys like Nolan Arenado tonight. So he has a ton of pop against lefties. I do actually like him in the spot, and even some of these cheap guys that might bat towards the bottom of the order, even Danny Valencia, who's the platoon bat for Baltimore, is someone that you can look at.
Yep, and he's the guy. I think last game we saw Pedro Alvarez come in for whenever a righty came in. So you do have kind of that issue where he can only get maybe two at bats.
Yeah, and that's going to happen. Obviously, it does kind of suck. Then, but that's the risk you take with some of these platoon guys.
Yep, definitely. Anyone else from Baltimore?
Trey Mancini's dirt cheap. Like he's 3,200 on DraftKings. I'm looking on FanDuel right now, and he is where is he? I had to scroll down a little bit. He's 2,800. He's been heating up.
Hitting lead off too.
Yeah, 6 for 19 in his last 4 games. Has a decent amount of pop. I don't mind maybe a one off of him as a value, especially first base option on DraftKings.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Let's move on here. Milwaukee, St. Louis. Yeah, Yulish Hassan taking on Michaelis here. This is an interesting kind of matchup here for him. Like, he's a cheap guy, but I think there is some upside here for him.
Mikolas made it into my pitching article as well. He's a guy I was really, really high on coming into the season, mostly because people are going to think he's the same pitcher he was whenever he was in the majors with the Rangers and with the Padres, where he was really, really bad. He went over to Japan, played 3 seasons over there. When he left, he ended up being one of the best pitchers in Japan, like probably top 3. And if you look, the Japanese baseball numbers, like as far as plate discipline and what they're doing at the plate, pretty comparable here to what we're doing here in the majors in the US. So he has some nasty breaking pitches, like just absolutely filthy breaking pitches. He's getting hitters to chase outside of the zone a lot, and just like Bundy, the Brewers do chase. They chase pitches out a lot. And this lineup is going to be hurting a little bit with Christian Yelich on the DL. Mikolas had a solid start to last game. He did give up, obviously, 3 home runs, but he struck out 5 hitters, got the win, hit a home run himself. Without Yelich in there, that's going to lead to another probably right-handed bat that could end up striking out a decent amount. I think he's a very, very good tournament option here, and he has a lot of strikeout potential here.
Yeah, I mean, this predicted lineup here, right around a 23% strikeout rate against right-handers going back to last year. Like you said, Yelich takes more of a contact bat out of that lineup, which definitely helps. You're probably going to see, obviously, like Domingo Santana in there, who strikes out quite a bit against righties. I don't have a ton of interest in the Milwaukee side. I think there are better ways to be contrarian tonight. I like that call quite a bit there.
Yeah, the only bats I would look at would be the lefties, Eric Thames and Travis Shaw. You could roll them out as some one-offs for, hoping that you're going to hunt some home runs.
Yep. St. Louis side, I have some interest here, really with the front 6 hitters. I mean, hell, I guess even 7 if you want to roll Paul DeJong or something for some power. But I kind of like the Cardinals here. Grew on me more from digging in last night. Pretty decent spot here against Chassin, who has struggled in his first 2 starts. Struggled in Petco, where he dominated all last year. I like going with these Cardinals bats. I'm curious to see how popular they are tonight, but a lot of good prices on them. I think they're an interesting value stack if you want to pair them with like a Syndergaard or Verlander here tonight.
Yeah, they're very interesting outside of, like, I don't necessarily want to roll like the bottom of the lineup. Like Colton Wong is not someone that I'm really looking at. Paul DeJong is fine if you want to get some exposure to like a power bat towards the bottom, but I really have a lot of interest in like 1 through 6. Dexter Fowler leading off. Hits the 2-seam fastball really well this season. That's something that Chassin has been relying on heavily. So I like him as a cheap one-off if you're not going to stack the Cardinals. But Tommy Pham, Matt Carpenter, Ozuna, Jose Martinez, Yadier Molina, all of these guys are in play. Carpenter's been getting on base a ton. Hasn't really put together a bunch of solid outings, but like I said, he has been getting on base. So I don't know. I think they're going to be a very contrarian stack here. And if you're fading Coors and you're going with another like high dollar stack, I think you mix in the Cardinals and you're going to have like some extremely contrarian bats in your lineup.
Yeah, definitely. And especially Carpenter, just because he's at those power corner positions on both sides, and like no one really likes to play him because obviously they just think he doesn't have some multi-home run upside. But man has over 200 ISO against righties dating back to last year. Like, there's some pop here. Obviously, it's not the greatest conditions. It's not the greatest ballpark to hit in, given it's early April. But front 4 here, given the value and the points per dollar potential that they all have, like it is a tremendous value stack.
Yeah, it really is. And like in cash games, I think Carpenter's always been a guy dating back to like 2016 that I've just been like, if I'm building a cash game lineup, Carpenter is going to go in there because he's going to give me points. So even in cash games, using like a one-off of Carpenter at first base is a solid option.
Yep. Atlanta, Washington next here. We got a rematch from a few games ago. Max Scherzer taking on Julio Teheran. Let's talk Max Scherzer here first. I think you and I are probably on the same page where we just don't like taking Max Scherzer against the Braves. Pedestrian numbers over his last 5 to 10 starts against him. It's pretty much been the same team. Just a lot of contact guys, a lot of lefties here. I just can't get behind using Scherzer over like a Thor or Verlander tonight if I'm paying up.
Yeah, if I'm paying up, it's definitely going to be Thor over Orlando over Scherzer. Like I hate taking pitchers for the most part against the Braves. Period, because they're pesky. They just make contact. They rarely strike out. And when you're paying 12K for a pitcher on DraftKings, and you're paying a ton over on FanDuel as well, he's 11-1. You need those strikeouts, and I just don't see him coming from this Braves lineup. I'd rather try to hedge and maybe take some of the Braves bats against him, if I'm trying to be a little bit contrarian in the spot.
Yeah, like the problem is with Scherzer now, like you can definitely foresee a couple of runs here that he gives up, and that's maybe he does strike out 7 or 8 guys, but when you take away the earned runs from it, it kind of only leaves you with about 4 or 5. So like, yes, obviously talented stuff, one of the best pitchers in baseball, but it's just not that great of a spot. I mean, projected lineup has about a 16% strikeout rate against right-handers. Like I said, just a ton of lefties. Just go Thor, go Verlander if you're paying up, but there's still even cheaper options too. You got a lot to choose from tonight.
Yeah, and Vegas is really, really low on the Braves, and I think they're wrong on this one. Like Scherzer, Scherzer struggled for a long time against left-handed hitters, and when you're loading that lineup with like 6 left-handers, that's going to spell trouble for him. So I think Freddie Freeman and like Nick Markakis, we were joking about Markakis prior to recording. I think those guys are excellent options. Preston Tucker is just a fantastic value bat towards the bottom of that lineup. A ton of power against right-handed pitching. He's been hitting the ball really well, striking out just right around league average, but like his average distance so far this season is 209 feet. Average exit velocity almost 92 miles an hour. Those are some solid numbers.
Yeah, definitely. Washington side of things here, obviously not looking at Tehran. We're in a similar situation as last time, except really it doesn't look like he can get any one side out yet.
Yeah, it's not looking good for Tehran. I think we have to start looking at Bryce Harper BVP. And like even if you're not a BVP truther, just lefties against Julio Tehran are a thing. They've been a thing for years. So obviously Bryce Harper, excellent option today. Like I think he's probably going to be the high price guy that I'm going to build around as far as a bat goes. But I love Adam Eaton at the top of that lineup. I don't even mind, Eaton, Rendon, Harper, Zimmerman stacking that. And if Matt Adams gets in the lineup, he's a guy of value bat, like at first base and outfield eligibility that you can pretty much lock in for a home run tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I like these bats. Like you said, I don't mind the righties. I wrote them up in the stacking article today just because now that Tehran is really struggling against both sides, you can fire away with guys like Rendon and Zimmerman, who will be fairly low owned tonight, just given that they're at first and third base with a couple of other options, probably overlooking them. So, as you mentioned, if we get some of the value lefties that pop up into the lineup, I mean, it was a late night game last night that did go extras. Maybe we see kind of a little bit of a wonky lineup. I definitely won't hate it, whatever they put out.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter to me what they put out. If they put out like even more lefties, like I don't know exactly how many lefties they have left, but like I said, Matt Adams could be a guy that gets in there. Wilmer Defoe could get in there. Like some of these value lefties could be in play.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we could keep an eye on Adam Eaton just because I know he was dealing with that ankle, just in case anything happens. He did sit out Saturday, but obviously played Sunday.
Yeah, and if he sits, you probably see Trey Turner leading off, and that'd be an excellent place to go.
Yep. Cincinnati, Philly, next one here. Cody Reed taking on Ben Lively. I definitely like some bats in this game. Good ballpark here. I like both sides. And I think this is a game I'm going to be getting a fair amount of exposure to. You mentioned you wish you could trust these Philly bats, and I kind of feel the same about both sides, where I would not be surprised if we get like a tilting game, but I could also see a ton of home runs here.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see like 6-7 runs on both sides of this game, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see this be like a 1-0 game, because all these bats have been markedly inconsistent outside of like Rhys Hoskins and Carlos Santana. There's a lot to like about both sides of this game. Like Ben Lively has some decent strikeout stuff. Not terribly reliable as a pitcher. Cody Reed, ground ball pitcher, but the dude walks like every batter he faces. Like he's averaging 9.68 walks per 9 innings dating back to last season. Actually, that is all of last season. He hasn't pitched yet because his first game got rained out. But yeah, there's a lot to like about both sides of this game.
Yeah, let's start with these Cincinnati bats. I like the lefties here. Just getting that lively. It's relatively small sample size in the bigs. 364 WOBA to lefties. Hard contact right around 30%, so it's not crazy high, but pretty pedestrian stuff against left-handers so far. 1.55 home runs per nine. I think Winker here leading off is an interesting value. Like he's super cheap if you want to get like basically a punt outfield option and use. I think he's much cheaper on DraftKings than he's over on FanDuel. But like I don't mind him. I think Votto, as bad as he's been at the plate, like this is a breakout spot for him. Scooter Gennett, very interesting as well.
Yeah, starting with Winker, he's probably the one guy that I would be looking at if you're not stacking this team, like, and if you're doing one-offs, just because he does have a decent amount of power against right-handed pitching, solid bat at the top of that lineup. You mentioned Votto, excellent option as well. Eventually, he's going to stop being not good, because he is one of the best hitters in baseball. So he's going to break out at one point or another. So I don't mind him. I'm interested to see what they do in that lineup with Suarez being out because he broke his thumb on Sunday, so that could end up meaning like Phil Gosselin or Cliff Pennington maybe gets in the lineup. No, Pennington would be the guy that I would probably look at. Like he's not a name that you're like really excited to roll out, but he is dirt cheap at 2,500 on DraftKings. He's probably minimum salary on FanDuel, so I think you could roll him out. And even someone like Scott Schebler, if he gets in the lineup, would be someone to look at here.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely some solid lefty bats. They're all got pretty solid pop against right-handed pitching too, and in that ballpark, pretty favorable. And the fact that Votto is what's DK price? He is 4,200. That's pretty low for, like you said, one of the best hitters in baseball.
Yeah, and just to cover the catcher position, if Tucker Barnhart gets in the lineup, he is a fantastic value catcher option. 16% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching, 138 ISO, 333 WOBA dating back to last season.
Yeah, definitely. Philly side things you mentioned, Reed, big ground ball guy, walked a ton of batters in a limited sample size. Obviously, being left-handed, that's going to throw a couple of these right-handed bats into that lineup. We've seen Kingery bat third against lefties so far this season. Solid value guy there. Aaron Altherr will slip into the lineup as well against the lefties. Two value guys. Like this Phillies offense did creep up a little bit in price just because of the solid weekend that they had. So they're not quite the value stack that they were, but still some bats here. I like a lot of the right-handers. Michael Franco has crushed lefties so far this season. I mean, has over a 200 ISO against lefties his career, just really hasn't put a complete season together. He's very interesting at third base here in GPPs.
Yeah, he really is. It's going to be interesting to see what his ownership is. Like because of where he's priced, like Machado, like on DraftKings, at least Machado's like 500 more. There's a couple of bats we're going to get to that are a little bit cheaper. I do really like him, especially if you're stacking the Philly side of this. You mentioned Kingery. He's an excellent option. Obviously, Rhys Hoskins, 400 ISO. The dude basically has not let you down if you've rostered him this season. I know he had one bad game against Miami where he only put up like 4 fantasy points, but like he's been so good. And in this park, I'm all over Rhys Hoskins as like if you're fading Coors and you're wanting to stack some of these other like power bats like Harper and whatnot, I think Hoskins has to be mentioned in that conversation.
Yeah, I do too. And you mentioned ownership here. Like I'm curious to see what Franco is as well. But I think Hoskins is interesting too, just because you have Harper, you have Coors, you have Trout up there. Like, is Hoskins going to be the guy that's overlooked? But I mean, he hasn't been, but he also has been in slates where like he is a main focal point. So I'm curious to see on a huge slate here with Coors if he's going to be that high owned.
I don't think he will. I don't think so at all.
No, I don't either. That's kind of it from this lineup. Anyone else you want to talk about?
Aaron Altherr, excellent option. Decent amount of pop against lefties, 283 ISO, should get in the lineup, sub 20% strikeout rate. Even Carlos Santana, who continues to just hit the cover off the ball, hasn't come to fruition too many times this season. He's had a couple good games, a lot of games where he's just been mediocre, but like he's still making really good contact. So as long as he's continuing to hit the ball really freaking hard, like I'm going to continue to look at him.
Yep. Moving on here, Mets and Marlins. Noah Syndergaard take on Jose Urena. Syndergaard, he comes in as kind of the number one option for me on the slates. You agree there?
Yes.
All right, let's move on. Obviously, I mean, Syndergaard what can you really say about this guy at this point? Like, I get the ERA doesn't look great to start the year, but I mean, strikeout rate, dating back to last year, obviously he was injured, but 30%. I mean, this guy is just solid. Misses a ton of bats, doesn't allow a ton of hard contact. I get his biggest flaw is holding runners on, but there's obviously not a lot of speed in this Marlins offense, maybe outside of a couple guys.
Yeah, I would say like his biggest flaw is obviously you mentioned holding runners and then the defense that's behind him, and like they're to blame at this point for some of Syndergaard's 5.40 ERA to start the season. As I put in the pitching article, don't let that fool you. Like he is still like an elite pitcher. The dude throws that sinker he throws is just absolutely unfair, and there's a lot of young bats in this Marlins lineup that I think are going to struggle. Obviously, you do have a couple guys that in a small sample have hit him pretty well, like Miguel Rojas, woohoo, professional hitter there, hit a home run yesterday against Arrieta, I believe. But there's just really no one in this lineup that I'm overly concerned with.
No, I'm not either. Like he's the pay up option. Just such a great spot. And then Mets side of things here against the Arena. Definitely going to be a contrarian way to go here, but I like really the front four here, especially the outfield. Like Conforto, probably one of my favorite plays on the slate here.
Yeah, I have a lot of interest in these Miami bats. I paused there because I was going to work in a really terrible pun, but I'm just not going to do it. I tweeted it out on opening day anyway. So I have a lot of interest in some of these power bats, especially guys like Michael Conforto. Now that he's back in that lineup, he broke out his first game with a home run coming back off the DL. He would be a guy I think is my primary focus. But I do like a lot of these lefties, the Confortos, the Jay Bruces, even someone like Asdrubal Cabrera, who's been hitting the ball really well recently, is in play. But they're going to be contrarian because it's not a great ballpark. But I think they're a great stack to look at.
Yeah, I do too. Like you got those lefties. You mentioned the Cabrera. I like that. I even don't mind Cespedes in there as well. I mean, over 200 ISO against righties dating back to last year. He's been swinging a hot stick to start the year as well. So yeah, that front four, very interesting to stack. And like you said, definitely going to be contrarian. Not a great ballpark, but I don't really care. At least it's in warmer weather.
Yeah, and you can even sprinkle in like Adrian Gonzalez as a cheap one-off or a cheap like first base option coming off a grand slam last night. So maybe he's heating up.
I can't believe it. What year is it?
2012.
Man, yeah. But yeah, Mets side here. Anyone else on the bottom line that you have interest in? Is that it?
I mean, you can get exposure to like whichever catchers in the lineup. Both guys are gonna be solid options. It's probably gonna be d'Arnaud, but like I don't necessarily mind rolling out Plawecki if he gets in the lineup. Pretty much everyone from the Miami side, from the Mets side of this game is in play.
Yeah, both those catchers showed some decent pop against righties too.
Yeah, they do, and I think right now, looking at projected lineup, Plawecki is projected to start.
Yeah. Texas and LA next year. Doug Fister take on Garrett Richards. Garrett Richards just far too cheap on DK again. That price didn't come up. Obviously, control's been an issue to start the year with him. 7 walks through 2 starts. The Cleveland start was very impressive because he did not look good early on that first inning and then really bounced back and struck out quite a bit of Cleveland bats, which is pretty tough to do. So that was a promising sign from what we saw in the first start where he wasn't missing a ton of bats.
I would say, generally speaking, striking out Indians bats is not easy to do. But
so far, it's been pretty easy, I guess.
So far, it has been pretty easy. I mean, Ian Kennedy struck out 8 of them, so like it has been pretty easy. But on the flip side of that, it's been pretty easy to strike out some of these Rangers this season. I mean, 22% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching so far. They have some guys like Gallo who still strikes out a ton despite the power. It's an interesting spot. Like, I don't know if I can trust him in cash games, strictly because the control is a huge issue, and that can get him in trouble, especially going up against some of these lefties that can hit the slider with a decent amount of power. That being said, I think he has a ton of strikeout potential in this matchup.
Yeah, I do too. Like you said, I mean, the matchup's really solid. You look at Richards, I mean, solid against lefties too. That ground ball rate holds. He can miss some bats, and that's always key when you're looking at this Rangers lineup. Ballpark really not playing that well to start the year. This Texas offense has just been awful. I think they've had, one solid game, and it still was more the back half of the lineup than the front half. So they just haven't done much. Like you said, Richards is tough to trust. I'm kind of curious. Like, I want to see what his ownership is, especially on DK where that price tag is, because there is potential he doesn't go terribly deep if the walks are an issue. You could have an edge if you do go someone else over Richards if he's extremely popular.
He has to be like there. Yeah. I don't see a scenario where he's not extremely popular. I mean, he's the cheapest pitcher that you can realistically trust on the slate, and with Coors being on the slate, like, you're going to need a cheap pitcher to get in your lineup. So I think he's going to be extremely popular, and even in tournaments, I think his ownership's going to be pretty high. So if you're wanting to hedge off the ownership and you're going to roll Coors in your GPP lineups, you're probably going to have to look somewhere elsewhere than Garrett Richards.
Yeah, I mean, what would you prefer, I guess, in GPPs? If you say if you're going like Thor Richards, or would you rather go like a Bundy Gray or Bundy something else lineup?
I'm probably going to go Bundy Mikolas.
Yeah, because it's same price, and you got two guys with upside, obviously at a similar price and probably a little bit less risk, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Mikolas does have some risk, probably the same amount as Richards, but like the ownership is going to be significantly lower, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, don't get us wrong. Well, I think we've trended downwards on Richards, but obviously still a very solid play here.
Yeah, it's more of an ownership thing if you're trying to pivot a little bit, because like I said, I think if you're rolling Coors and you're trying to use Richards, you're probably going to be extremely chalky.
Yeah. I don't really like Texas bats against Richards here, even as one-offs. I mean, Gallo
or Nomar, that'd be about it.
Yeah. Angels side of things here, Doug Fister. You mentioned before the show, you're just like, I don't know if I can stack against Fister again, just because he hasn't blown up a lot. Like, I can't even recall off the top of my head the last time Fister's blown up, but I like these Angels bats here. Like Upton, obviously heating up, had a huge weekend. Cozart's been hitting the ball well, been a little bit unlucky to start the year. Obviously, you have Mike Trout, and talking about Mike Trout's ownership a little bit before the show, like, the last time Harper was facing Tierra, and that was without Coors, he was like 13% in GPPs. That's a dropping ownership here tonight. Like, if I'm getting Trout at 10%, like come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we know Doug Fister probably not as good as he has been recently. It's one of those scenarios where it's like 2016 again, when everyone's trying to stack against Martin Perez at home and it never works out. Like, it's kind of that thing. Like, there's probably going to be a Doug Fister blow-up game, and it could come against this Angels team. It's kind of frustrating whenever you're like, man, Doug Fister really sucks, I'm going to stack against him, and then he goes out and he doesn't give up like more than 2 earned runs. So yeah. I think in tournaments, the Angels are an excellent stack. I'd love it if Ohtani was going to be in the lineup, but he's not, because he pitched yesterday. You mentioned the Trouts and the Uptons; those guys are fine. I think I want to target the lefties a little bit more, because Fister has really, really struggled against lefties. 358 WOBA, almost 41% hard contact dating back to last season. So that's kind of where I would look. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of lefties in that lineup. I mean, you're looking at Valbuena, Calhoun, and maybe Ryan Schimpf if he gets in the lineup. Schimpf hit a home run yesterday, my boy. I do like him if he gets in the lineup, because he is like 2,500 on DraftKings. Yeah.
I mean, you definitely meant like the lefties is where you ideally want to attack, just because he has shown such a weaker against that side. I like the Valbuena call. I think he's an interesting GPP option. Obviously, decent ballpark. Had really solid numbers against sinkers last year. That's kind of where I was looking. Like, all these guys had decent numbers against sinkers, and digging into the ground ball rates. I mean, Cozart was the only one over 50%. So like, they're still getting some lift on these balls, which helps out here. And obviously, they're not missing a ton of them, which rarely do you really see with sinkers anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And that's completely fine. Like the Val Bueno call, I think is an excellent even one-off option. I mean, he's a guy. He doesn't strike. He strikes out like 26% of the time, but he also gets on base a decent amount. So he has a little bit of pop too. And I do kind of like him as a one-off. And then again, if Schimpf gets in the lineup, which I'm hoping he does, he would be like a lock for my lineups.
Yeah. I guess I don't hate Cole Calhoun, who actually does like hitting in Texas too. He always has solid games in Texas.
Yeah, he's an excellent option to look at too.
Houston, Minnesota. Houston going up to the North Pole to play this game. Minnesota's been brutally cold. They've been canceling games. Still some snow. I think Chicago's dealing with snow, so I think there's more snow kind of moving through the Midwest here. So I guess a little bit of concern. I don't have a lot of interest in bats here just because of this weather. I would if this game was warmer. I'd be stacking up against Lance Lynn, but I think Verlander's probably the only guy that I have interest in.
Yeah, obviously the weather helps him a little bit, and the matchup is pretty solid. I went in depth a little bit in the pitching article about some of his pitch mix and how it matches up pretty well against this Twins team. There are a couple bats with like Rosario and Escobar that do hit his pitch mix pretty well, but they're still striking out a decent amount. 24.3% to start the year. Verlander outside of the Baltimore game has been really solid, still notching a ton of strikeouts, 26% dating back to last season. He's solid against both sides of the plate. He does struggle a little against lefties with hard contact and home runs, but I think this is an excellent spot for him. And I think with Thor being pretty much about the same price, I think Verlander is going to go overlooked, and he could be an excellent tournament option, assuming this game plays.
Yeah, I agree. I like that call there. Verlander's the guy. I mean, just gotta watch out for Joe Mauer. He's the only one with the BVP numbers.
Yeah, and Mauer has actually been really good this season. I mean, he's hit safely in 6 straight games. He's scored a run in 4 straight. Like we're not getting a ton of power out of him, but we're getting some vintage Joe Mauer like offense.
We're home discount Mauer here.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm assuming you're not taking any minutes for the bats here, even as one-offs.
I mentioned Rosario and Escobar. That'd be about it.
Yeah. Houston side of things, obviously not looking at Lance Lynn. I would love to want Houston, if I'm kind of on a final lineup and I'm like, I don't got much here, maybe I can build a Houston stack, but I kind of like the lefties here, like Marwin and Reddick are interesting. I guess a one-off in McCann, but probably just lefties here for me because expensive front-end options, I think I'm still going to be going elsewhere and can still be contrarian.
When did Houston start sucking?
They'll be fine.
I know they will. They were so bad this weekend though. Like everyone stacked against or stacked them up yesterday, and nobody did anything. It was kind of frustrating. You mentioned the lefties; those are the guys that I'm primarily focusing on, just because Lance Lynn against left-handed hitters, dating back to last season, 1.87 home runs per 9, 353 WOBA allowed, 5.71 walks per 9. Yeah, I love Josh Reddick here. I do like Marwin Gonzalez, even a Derek Fisher or someone like that towards the bottom of that lineup. If you're wanting to get some exposure to Houston, I would maybe do some one-offs of the lefties.
Yep, that's how I see it here. Let's move on. Seattle, Kansas City. You got Gonzalez take on Junis here. It's a game I think a lot of people are just going to be kind of crossing off the slate, but I think there's some interesting one-off bats here from both sides.
I actually have some interest in a lot of Seattle bats, and I think a couple one-offs of the Royals here. Obviously, Junis coming off an outstanding game. 7+ innings, gave up 3 singles, no runs, had some strikeouts in there. I don't see the strikeouts in this lineup, and I don't know if I buy into his first start. He has some really terrifying underlying numbers, especially to righties, 37% hard contact, 301 WOBA allowed, 2 walks per 9, 1.3 home runs per 9. I like both sides of this plate for Seattle, and I think that starts with D. Gordon, who's just been outstanding to start the season. I like Robbie Cano. I like Gene Segura, Mitch Haniger, super cheap, 3,400. Excellent spot for him. I think he would be a guy that I might have in my home run call later on.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, Haniger is a guy that I have a lot of interest in here. I mean, over 200 ISO against righties dating back to last year. Obviously, plenty of pop. Hitting fourth lately here, which definitely helps some upside with Cruz out there. And like you mentioned, I like the Gore and Segura Cano calls. I think Seager's an interesting value at third base to be contrarian. Definitely has some pop against right-handers. Going to be all probably single-digit ownership guys for most part.
Yeah, I think they will be. And Robbie Cano, like, isn't hitting the ball very far this season. Average distance 140 feet, but he's hitting the ball really freaking hard, like almost 95 mile an hour average exit velocity. Haniger 231, 93.2 miles per hour. Both these guys have a decent amount of pop. Like I said, I really like them. I like this stack a lot. And even like a one off of like Dan Vogelbach at like first base could be a solid play.
Yep. Royal side of things here, Gonzalez being the lefty. I mean, Whit Merrifield's interesting, I guess, here. Over 200 ISO against lefties last year. Not going to be a guy a lot of people go with. He's fairly cheap across the industry. Other than that, like Jorge Soler has a tough time just hitting the ball in general, but does have some power against lefties. If you want to get weird, I think those are the two guys I'd do it with.
Yeah, Gonzalez went deep into that game against the Giants, but he just wasn't that great. And if you look at his numbers, like 2.38 home runs per nine allowed to lefties dating back to last season, 1.8 to righties, a lot of hard contact to right-handed hitters, 392 WOBA allowed to righties, 366 to lefties. I think you can use both sides of this game. Like John Jay probably going to lead off. Doesn't strike out a ton. 341 WOBA to lefties dating back to last year. Whit Merrifield, you mentioned, a ton of power. Even Alcides Escobar is someone that you can realistically roll out in the spot, and then you can sprinkle in Moustakas and Chesler Cuthbert, and even Duda has a decent amount of pop against lefties. So I do like some of these Royals bats, and they're not going to be very popular options.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I definitely think you can definitely use some. Like if you're going with a somewhat chalky lineup, like some one-offs from this game will give you at least a couple bats that'll be really low owned.
Yeah, for sure. And someone like you mentioned, Soler, he's dating back to July 2nd. He was like 0 for 34, and he finally got 3 hits on Sunday. So maybe he's going to start heating up. You could roll him out, and that'd be about it. But I like some of these Royals. I think they're going to be very underowned, and like they're not striking out very much. Their offense is terrible, but they're at least not striking out. So that's a plus.
Yeah, same old Royals team then.
Yeah.
Coors game here. We got San Diego taking on Colorado. We'll say the San Diego side is, I guess, somewhat underpriced for being in Coors, but I don't have a ton of interest here. I like John Gray. I like him playing him in GPPs here tonight just because obviously there's still some upside. I know Coors can depreciate strikeouts a little bit, but Gray still has some upside against this team who's missing Will Myers, who is a Coors legend. Outside of that, like there's a ton of strikeouts here for Gray. Gray's still in that kind of mid 8K range for price. I like him in GPPs. I can't trust him in cash out because this is still Coors, and this can still be one of those games where you have one inning where San Diego puts up 5 earned. It can just happen, but I still like Gray here. He's probably one of my maybe 4th favorite pitcher on the slate, I guess.
Yeah, I like him a little bit as well. And it's kind of interesting. If you look at his numbers last season, his home away splits are really, really interesting. He allowed a 4.06 ERA away last year, 3.13 at home, 16 earned runs at home, 29 on the road, 283 WOBA allowed. I think his strikeout numbers obviously went up away just because when you're not in Coors, your breaking balls are going to move. And in Coors, you throw a curveball in it straight because it doesn't move. But I think this is still a decent spot for him. And if you're wanting to be extremely contrarian in tournaments, you can roll out some Gray. You mentioned that the Padres bats, there's not a whole lot to really like about them in this spot. I think there's a couple guys that you can use as one-offs. You and I were talking about Freddie Galvis to start, before we started recording. He's just an excellent, I would even call him like a great cash game option, just because he's just really, really consistent. And in 10 straight games, he's at least gotten on base. He has, I think, 5 multi-hit games across that span. And if you wanted to mix in like a Manuel Margot or Christian Villanueva as like some power bats, you can. But I do like the Gray and tournament call.
Yeah, and like I said, like Padres are finding one-offs at their prices because there is still some power here. You mentioned the breaking stuff. I mean, if he relies a good amount on that slider, which he should here tonight, man, these Padres bats are awful against sliders.
Yeah, they really are.
So, Colorado side of things here, Clayton Richard, lefty on the hill. Definitely like some of the right-handed bats. Curious to see if Charlie Blackmon's in the lineup. I know he tweaked his back over the weekend, sat out yesterday. That was the reason why he was bunting late night game, if you were tilting that. So that is something to note there. We saw Iannetta jump up to the 2 spot yesterday. We'll be curious if Blackmon sits if that happens again. Obviously, it would be a great value. I would even play him on FanDuel, where no one's going to be playing catchers anymore.
Yeah, I like him, especially on FanDuel at catcher. Obviously, has some BVP against Clayton Richard as well. 6 for 17, 2 home runs. So you have that. Obviously, the Coors boost. He would be probably the top catcher option on the slate if you're wanting to stack Coors. You mentioned Blackmon not being in the lineup. It will be interesting to see if he gets in tonight. Like, I wonder if it was kind of like his back was just a little sore, so they're like, let's just take the day off. I would think he probably gets back in. You can even roll him out. I know it's lefty on lefty, but like still excellent splits against lefties. Nolan Arenado, DJ LeMahieu, great options here. Obviously, Arenado 419 ISO against lefties dating back to last season would be probably one of the top third basemen on the slate regardless. Bless you. It will be interesting to see if Blackmon's not in the lineup. Because I wasn't paying attention yesterday. Who got in the lineup over him?
We saw Pat Valaika get in there because they don't have a lot of righty bats that they can load up on. I mean, Valaika's kind of the only guy. Like, everyone else is basically left-handed, so it's not like they have a lot of platoon right-handed bats to toss in.
Yeah, so Valaika would probably be the value option to look at if he gets in the lineup. What is he? He's 2,800 on DraftKings. Hasn't really hit the ball that well, but he'd be a good value bet to consider.
Yep. Yeah, you mentioned those guys. Trevor Story is always in play against a lefty with his power, hitting, middle of the lineup towards the bottom half of the lineup, but definitely very much in play here.
Yeah, I would like to see like him actually, hit the ball.
Hey, he homered over the weekend.
Yeah, he did. Twice actually. He's also still striking out like 35% of the time, but he would be a good power bat if you're stacking Coors as well.
Yep. Last game of the night here, you got Zach Galdi taking on Derek Holland. I know you have some interest here in the Arizona bats, and definitely going to be a contrarian way just because I think a lot of people are going to forget this game out here on the West Coast. But definitely some good right-handed bats here against Holland.
Yeah, Holland dating back to last season, 40% hard contact to right-handed hitters, 403 WOBA. Not really striking anybody out, 2.17 home runs per 9. I definitely want to get some exposure to these righties. Nick Ahmed, my man, Nick Ahmed, 273 ISO against right-handed pitching, super cheap on DraftKings and FanDuel. I like him as a one-off shortstop option. I like him in a stack. I love Goldschmidt in the spot. Goldschmidt loves hitting at AT&T Park. Batting 310 with 9 home runs and 41 ribbies in 59 games here at AT&T Park. I don't care about the negative park factor. Like, I still like the spot for all of these Arizona righties.
I do too. Plenty of extra base hit upside too. You're going to get some low ownership on them. I like the goalie call. Nick Ahmed, one of my favorite players. If you've been following this pod, you know that already. Definitely some solid options here. Curious to kind of see what their bottom half of the line, because I know they can roll up some funky stuff. Like we saw Mathis get in there. Devin Marrero finally, cracked the lineup. I would have some interest in some of these guys, given that they're really, really cheap against Holland. And I mean, on the slate, there's no one who's allowing a higher WOBA to right-handed bats than Derek Holland. So sign me up here.
Yeah, and I'm using these Arizona bats over Coors. Like you and I were kind of talking about it. Like I don't play cash games really. For MLB, I mostly play tournaments. Like I'll throw out some head-to-heads and whatnot, but I fade Coors slates 100% every single time. Like, because you're going to have games where they go off like 10 runs, but you're also going to have games where the Rockies get shut out. And if that happens tonight and you fade Coors in tournaments and you get like 6-7 runs out of these Arizona bats, or one of these other stacks that we've talked about, you're going to be sitting really, really pretty. So I love using these Arizona bats because you're going to get so low ownership, especially at their prices because they are kind of priced up.
Yeah, definitely. Giant side things here, like I don't like Godley in the spot, but I don't really like picking on Godley just because he has a strong ground ball rate. Not a lot of power bats in these Giants. I mean, unless you want McCutchen if he's going to get 6 hits again, but not a lot here in this Giant side to really get excited about.
I don't mind, if you want to throw out like a contrarian Giant stack. There's not a whole lot to love about like the matchup here for them. But if you wanted to roll out like someone like Brandon Belt, who's really, really cheap, he's $3K on DraftKings. Posey, just a consistent bat. McCutchen, you mentioned. Joe Panic, solid as well. Hunter Pence has the BVP against Godley. Where is it? He is. I'm trying to find it in my notes. He 4 for 5 with 2 homers. It's pretty solid.
Yeah, not bad there.
So yeah, again, if you want to roll out some Giants, they're going to be really, really contrarian. So if you wanted to roll them out, you could.
Yep. Home run calls. Who do you got? Who are your 2?
Rhys Hoskins.
God damn it! Come on.
And Preston Tucker.
Ooh, I like that. I'm gonna go stay in that same game from the first one. Go Joey Votto. Second, I'm gonna go Luis Valbuena.
I like it.
So that's it for us. You can enter our dayfantasycafe.com. Brent was on the GP or on the pitching article today. I was on stacking. Cheat sheets are up for tonight as well. And good luck.
Good luck.